Hey, how's it going? My name is Will and this is Idiot Proof Cooking. If you're new to the channel, I make simple and easy to follow recipes that I consider are idiot proof because hey, if an idiot like me can make something, you certainly can too. And if you've seen the channel before, you know the drill. So let's get into it. What am I making today? I am going to be making a quiche, which I consider one of the greatest foods ever invented because it combines two amazing foods, a pie and an omelet. That's pretty much what it is. It's like an omelet pie. And you know what? They are super easy to make. Really, the most tricky part of it is making the pie crust, which can be kind of a pain, but you know, if you've seen the channel before, you should know that it's really not that hard to put a pie crust together. It comes together pretty simply. So you know what? What are we doing still talking about it here? Let's just get into making it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to tackle is the pie crust for this quiche. Now they're pretty easy to make, but they're definitely easier if you use your food processor. So into your food processor, add in 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour. Next in is 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, and then we're going to add in 3/4 cup of unsalted butter. Make sure it's nice and cold and cut it up into cubes. Now you want it to be nice and cold so that when you blend it up like I'm doing here, the butter forms nice little granules in the flour. If it's too warm, it's just going to melt, and that's not what you're looking for. You want to be able to pick up the flour and have little pieces of butter, like little flecks of butter all the way throughout. So after you've blended that all together, it's time to start blending it again and slowly pour in 5 tablespoons of ice cold water until the dough starts to form just a little bit. Like you can see, it's done here. It's not going to completely clump together, it's just going to form like little balls of dough, and that's what you're looking for. That's what you're looking for the consistency of your pie crust. Like as you can see here, it's nice and clumpy if you squeeze it, but it doesn't all come together right away. So we're going to dump this out onto our cutting board here, and then we're just going to carefully knead it all together. You don't want to over knead it again because you don't want to melt the butter, so just give it a few kneads just to form it together. Then form it into a disc with your hand, and then wrap it up in some plastic wrap carefully. And we're going to stick this in the fridge just for about half an hour to give the butter some time to cool down again. It's obviously heated up from kneading the dough, so you just want to let it cool down again. You really don't want it to melt before you bake it. After half an hour or so, it's time to start working with our dough here. So I'm just going to lay some flour down on my cutting board here, and I'm going to sprinkle the top of my dough with some flour. I'm going to flour up my rolling pin and start carefully rolling this out. Now obviously we want to make this big enough, this dough big enough, so that it will fit into our tart pan, because that's what we're going to be making our quiche in. So after you've made the dough big enough, roll it up with your rolling pin, bring your tart pan over, and then carefully drape your dough over top of the tart pan. Just like that, nice and simple. So once that's in, you might have to readjust it, but once it's in, just start pressing the dough down into your tart pan, pressing up along the sides of the walls, and then use a sharp knife to trim off the excess pastry. I realized that I called the pastry dough throughout the first half of this video. Oops. What are you gonna do now? I'm not gonna re-record that. So next you're going to dock the pastry with a fork, poke some holes in the bottom of it, and I'm going to stick it in the freezer just for like half an hour to firm up. After it's firmed up in the freezer for a little bit, bring it out, get it on a baking sheet, and we're going to blind bake it. So I'm just going to get some tin foil here, and I'm going to press it down into the tart pan, into the pastry, because we're going to throw some pie weights on. Now I'm going to be using my favorite bag of rice. I've been using the same bag of rice for like 4 or 5 years now to bake my pie pastries with. Really, you can use a bag of rice, or you can pour some sugar in, or you can buy actual pie weights to weigh down your pastry. Really, any of those work. But whatever you use, preheat your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit and bake your pie crust for about 8 to 10 minutes just to firm up the pie crust just a little bit. As you can see here, it's gotten a little bit flaky and the walls of the pie crust have shrunken a little bit, and that's okay. But anyways, it's now time to start assembling our quiche. So I'm going to start off by adding in a fairly liberal helping of cubed ham into my pie crust here, because I'm going to make a ham and cheese quiche. So the next ingredient is is obviously some cheese. I'm going to be using a fairly large amount of shredded medium cheddar. Then I'm going to set that aside for a moment because now it's time to deal with the eggs. I've got 6 large eggs here, and I'm just going to crack them all into a bowl here. There we go, 6 into a bowl. Then I'm going to add in 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream. Next in is a good pinch of kosher salt, and then some freshly ground black pepper, just a few twists of that. What you're going to do now is get out your trusty whisk and break all of the yolks and whisk this all until it's thoroughly combined. Look at that, there's your quiche mix, I guess is what you'd call it. So bring back your tart pan with your pie crust in it, and we're going to pour this egg mixture all over the ham and cheese in the crust, obviously. Make sure everything is good and covered. You might have to just, like spread it out with a spoon a little bit, make sure it's nice and even, but pour it all out, and then we're going to preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and bake this for 30 to 40 minutes until it comes out looking something like that. Look at how beautiful that is. Now, as you can see, the egg is nice and puffed up at this point in time. It is going to sink a little bit as we let it cool down, because we're going to let it cool down just for about 10 to 15 minutes before we get into it. As you can see here, I can handle it now, so it's been about 10-15 minutes. So what we're going to do is just get a little ramekin here, because we're going to get it out of our tart pan. So just take the tart pan, place it over the ramekin, and pop, there it goes. Look at that, it just comes right off. So let's get in and start cutting this. It smells amazing. Rose is bugging me for a bite. Meg's off to the side at this point in time asking for a bite too. So we got to go in for the taste test, and look at that. Look at all that ham and egg and the cheese all through it. This is gorgeous. It smells so good. Quiche is so easy, guys. Like, it came together in no time. So here we go. Let's go in for the taste test, and with the first bite, let me tell you, it was fantastic. It's breakfast pie, essentially. That's essentially what it is. It's an omelette pie, and a little bite for Rose, and of course she loved it. But yeah, it's like a breakfast omelette pie. What more could you ask from that? It is just so tasty, so easy. Like, as you can see from the video, the toughest part would have been the pie crust, but overall just a great thing to make. I love quiches. They are awesome. So let's call it there. I think this was a pretty good episode. I had a lot of fun making this. I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you did, why don't you drop me a comment, like the video, or even subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching 80 Proof Cooking, and we'll see you again soon.